supply to the astronauts, but that's been cleared. The hatch has been closed, the weather is fine, and the shuttle will lift off at 1 o'clock our time. ITN will be back to bring you live coverage of the final moments in the countdown and the launch itself. That's at 5 minutes to 1.
This is BBC One, and now we go over to the Tomorrow's World team for special coverage of the launch of the American Space Shuttle.
Well, is today the 20th anniversary of man's first adventure in space, when Colonel Yuri Gagarin went into space for the first time, turn out to be the day for the American Space Shuttle. There she sits, the picture's coming to you live from pad 39A at the Kennedy Space Center. Columbia, the world's first reusable manned spacecraft. Sitting there as she has since late in December, but now into the final 15 minutes before her first launch. But of course, we've all been here before. It was actually at 9 minutes to launch on Friday last that the world got the first hint of the computer hitch which delayed and then cancelled that first attempt to prove that a spaceship can be launched, can orbit and return safely to Earth in a fit state to make the trip again many times. Well, with me yet again here in Britain watching the mission is Geoffrey Pardo, who on Friday so skillfully guided us through the complexities of backup computers and inertial measurement units. Geoffrey, could a similar fate be in store for us even now?
Well, not that one, I'm pleased to say. That was a very unusual fault. I don't see any problems, and indeed I think it's a credit to the vehicle that both yesterday and today, the principal countdown has gone so well. I'm very confident.
So, fingers crossed from you. 13 minutes and 53 seconds, I reckon, to go to liftoff, and here with his latest report from the Cape is our man who is watching things at Launch Complex 39A, Kieran Prenderville.
Yes, Mike, hello again from the Cape with the news that we are hoping for a launch on schedule. NASA, as you know, has sorted out Columbia's computer problem, which delayed Friday's launch. The problem being not with the backup computer, as everybody thought, but the 4 other computers it was designed to keep an eye on. Well, they were working well, all right, but late. In fact, they were some 40 milliseconds out of step. And when the backup computer came online at T-20, it spotted it. With a rare burst of clarity, NASA scientists explained that the backup computer simply hung up the phone. Because the information it was getting was late, in the eyes of the computer, that information was wrong. So, in effect, NASA was left with a situation where 4 computers were saying one thing, and the 5th was saying another, which left them not a lot of choice. Well, whatever problems we have today, hopefully that won't be one of them. As I say, for the moment, it's all systems go. And when everything is going so smoothly, there's not a lot Launch Control can do except to try and relax and just wait. Throughout the night, the shuttle stack gleamed like a national monument, which is almost what it's become. It's been on the ground so long. Well, hopefully that will all change before the day is over. The day for John Young, that's him on the left, and Bob Crippen, began with a breakfast of steak and eggs, orange juice and coffee. Both looking a bit tired, but if anything, rather less tense than they did 2 days ago. John Young on the left there, looking rather the more somber of the two. Young, the veteran of many previous space missions, Apollo and Gemini. And that's the hatch of the orbiter through which the astronauts crawl rather than walk. The suiting room, John Young having his helmet put on. John Young, who incidentally wears glasses even in space, he uses them for what NASA calls close-up work. I bet that's the first time anyone's seen an astronaut about to go on a mission with glasses. On the way now to the van, which will take them to launch pad 39A. Young leading the way. That's Crippen behind, smiling broadly. He's having a ball by the look of it.
Thank you, Kieran. So there they go, 2 courageous men, and with them go our best wishes. Those pictures recorded a couple of hours ago. We are still, the news is, on course for a launch in a little over 10 minutes. The world's first reusable spacecraft. Here she is, and of course, at liftoff, she will be carrying with her the giant external tank which carries the fuel for her 3 main engines built into the spacecraft itself. Alongside the external tank, 2 solid rocket boosters. Now at liftoff, all 5, 3 main engines, 2 boosters, will burn together. A little over 2 minutes later, 30 miles up, the boosters will be spent, they will parachute into the Atlantic. 6 minutes or so after that, this giant tank, believe it or not, will be empty, and with Columbia travelling at over 17,000 miles per hour, and then at a height of 75 miles, the tank will be jettisoned to burn up and fall to Earth. She will then be on her own, and will go into orbit under the influence of the 2 tiny engines which make up the orbital maneuvering system, fueled from on board, and a series of even smaller thruster rockets built into the tail, the side of the spacecraft, and into the nose. Now the intention is then a mission of 37 orbits going east from the Cape, out over the Atlantic first of all, and of course because of the way the Earth is tilted and because we rotate on this planet, each orbit will follow a slightly different path. But all being well, 54.5 hours after liftoff, 37 orbits later, Columbia will be on a trajectory which will bring her in over the Pacific for a landfall here in the Mojave Desert, high above Los Angeles in California, at the Dryden.
Hello, Mike. T-9 here. The weather is absolutely perfect, no problems at all. And so far the countdown has been all but flawless. The computers have now all come online, they all work, and when they learnt that, over in ground control, or launch control I should say, there were very loud cheers. There is a rumour buzzing around the Cape at the moment, by the way, that the Russians are about to put up a spaceship themselves in a bid to steal Columbia's thunder. As you said, today is the 20th anniversary of Yuri Gagarin's first flight, the first ever man in space. Now, this is nothing more than a rumour. It may well be mild paranoia, things being as they are. It is, after all, nearly 4 p.m. in central Russia where they launched their spacecraft, and that's very, very late to put anything up. Somewhat unlikely, I think, but, well, who knows?
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. We can't confirm here in Britain that the Russians plan any activity, but obviously if we get reports of that, you will be the first to hear. For now, we can report that the first test launch of the much-delayed American shuttle is still on the cards for a little over 7 minutes from now. And of course, for the second time in 48 hours, that means the 2-man crew, 50-year-old Commander John Young and his 43-year-old pilot, Bob Crippen, the one closest to the camera in this shot, will be back in the cockpit of Columbia, waiting for an experience neither they nor their machine have ever been through before. Let's look now at the pictures we received on Friday evening when we saw these 2 men who, having spent 5 hours in the spacecraft, emerged exactly where they went in.
This is Shuttle Launch Control. Astronaut Bob Crippen has just emerged from the hatch in the orbiter, the first of the 2 prime crew members to leave the orbiter.
So there's Bob Crippen. Bob Crippen safely out of the spacecraft, a disappointed man, hardly looking his usual cool, presentable self, and following him, his commander, 7 years older, John Young, still with his helmet on, obviously a disappointed man. If John Young makes it today, this will be his 5th space flight, and for an American astronaut, that will be a record. The glasses that Kieran was talking about earlier, interesting to observe that you no longer have to have 20/20 vision to go into space, just as long as your eyesight is perfect when it has been optically corrected. 5 hours then, strapped in a seat designed for a horizontal flight, strapped in a vertical position, of course, on the launch pad. John Young is 50. Jeffrey Pardo, can a man stand up to those sort of circumstances with ease?
Well, he can, not necessarily with ease, but he can stand up to it. I think that the fact that they've come out is, in a way, a good thing, because, you know, it was a pretty tense situation for them, and I would have been, I think, less happy as they would if they'd had to go up into orbit yesterday. So the delay is frustrating, but I think it's had no effect on the mission with the overnight rest they've
Probably
had.
made worse by the fact that they were closest to the computer problem, but could do absolutely nothing about it.
Well, it was ironic. As a matter of fact, in this cutaway of the model we've got here, The avionics bay, where the computers is right here, underneath the flight deck. This is, in fact, the right-hand side there, because it's cut in half, the pilot.
Let me point you to the pictures that we were receiving from the satellite just a second ago, Geoffrey. Sorry to interrupt you. We appear to be up on the gantry of the spacecraft. This is the sort of view that we can see from that high up.
The auxiliary power units are ready to be started.
Auxiliary power units.
Minus 5 minutes, 15
Crucial
seconds
stage, is it not? Because once they've got these going, it's almost certain that they will go.
That's right. Of course, they're in the automatic sequence that started at minus 9 minutes, and the gantry's moved away now.
5-minute point.
So the gantry is clear.
3, 2, 1, mark. T-minus 5 minutes and counting. We have had a go for APU start.
So it looks as if they are going to go this time.
This is a start sequence. The final chase plane is taken off from Patrick Air Force Base.
Well, sorry to interrupt you, Geoffrey. Perhaps it'd be a good time to see if we can reach Kieran at the Cape for the latest exciting news. Are you with us, Kieran?
Yes, we now have a definite go for a launch. The auxiliary power unit has just been switched on. We are go for launch. I should tell you, by the way, that what's interesting here is how much the atmosphere has changed from Friday, before that launch was called off, at a time when everyone assumed that everything was going well. There was a real carnival atmosphere about this place. Oh, sure, there was tension, but there was a lot of smiling and laughing, confident expectation that very soon America would have something to smile about. But all that's been replaced today by a much more serious mood, and although the countdown has gone very well, the increase in tension now is impossible to miss.
Kieran, many thanks, many thanks. What was the view of the bottom of the engine showing us there, Geoffrey?
Well, that's the liquid hydrogen vent off. The oxygen comes out of the top of the big external tank, and that's just venting. That's perfectly normal at this stage.
So, frustrations and computers on Friday, excitement and expectation now. Less than 4 minutes to go, 4 minutes away from the start of a historic mission. What will it be like for the men who are now on board? Commander John Young took us through what he and Bob Crippen are about to experience.
Well, Space Shuttle is a very different vehicle from the Apollo, and we think launch will be a lot more interesting from a crewman's viewpoint. Initial takeoff is characterized by the main engine starting up and reaching 90% thrust as the vehicle is sitting on the launch pad. And when they reach 90% thrust, the vehicle will heel over 19 inches in the cockpit. We'll see a motion, and then it'll come back up straight, and as it gets back up straight, they'll fire the solid rocket motors, and it'll go up vertically. And it doesn't fool around like the Apollo did. It's got a very high thrust-to-weight ratio, and in 6 seconds it's above the tower. In some 50 seconds it's going supersonic. At the end of 2 minutes it's at 150,000 feet in Mach 4.4 or Mach 4.5. And at the end of 8 minutes and 33 seconds we're in orbit. So it's going to be a very interesting ride. Even so, the only...
2.5 minutes away from that happening. So over to Cape Canaveral, to Kieran, for the build-up to the launch itself.
Yes, Mike. Excuse me. There are a couple of things to look out for, I should say, in the last few seconds before liftoff. 2 minutes now before the launch. When the main engines fire, the shuttle will stay clamped to the launch pad, despite their enormous power trying to wrench it away. Something like the power of 23 Hoover dams, according to the maker. Now, Launch Control wants to be sure they're working properly first, but they know as well that as long as the shuttle is held down, the engines are going to force the whole stack to bend or twang with the strain. Now, that'll only be a few inches. They'll feel it in the cockpit, but we won't see it from here. It'll take a few seconds to ease back into position, and that's when they'll light the solid boosters. They'll reach full power in just half a second. That's when they'll explode the hold-down bolts, and with all those engines firing together, we're going to see one heck of a lot of smoke and flames. As John Young said, it's going to clear the tower a lot quicker than the old Apollo ships. And you can imagine the noise that 6 million pounds of thrust is going to make as well. T-minus 1 minute, 20 seconds. And because of that noise, by the way, that's why the engineers are going to pour 300,000 gallons of water onto the pad 10 seconds before liftoff. That's literally to dampen the sound, to try and prevent too much sound vibration bouncing back off the pad and damaging the launch vehicle. T-minus 1 and counting.
Firing system for the sound suppression water will be armed just a couple seconds from now. It has been armed. T-minus 45 seconds and counting.
40 seconds and counting. The development flight instrumentation recorders are on. T-minus 35 seconds. We're just a few seconds away from switching to the redundant sense sequencer. T-minus 27 seconds. We have gone for redundant set sequencer start. T-minus 20 seconds and counting. T-minus 15, 14, 13, T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. We've gone for main engine start. We have main engine start. America's first space shuttle. And the shuttle has cleared the tower.
What a fantastic sight. Now at the speed of sound. And the cheering and clapping here all over the Cape.
Columbia, Houston, you're going throttle up. Roger, going throttle up.
Well, the astronauts have now passed the 19-mile mark. They can't use their ejection seats after this point if they should need to. I'm sure they won't.
Roger, Columbia on the nice ride. You're lofting a little bit.
Any second now the boosters will run out of fuel and we should see them go.
Go. Columbia, you're negative C. That call up says that Columbia, the altitude is too high for ejection seat use.
Boosters are shut down.
Columbia, you're go for SRB step. 2 minutes, 4 seconds, standing by for SRB step confirmation. Roger on the step, Columbia.
And there go the solid rocket boosters. Forced away from the path of the shuttle by tiny rocket motors in the side of the two boosters. They, even without power, their momentum is going to carry them another 10 miles up before they parachute down to the Atlantic.
2 minutes, 30 seconds.
Incidentally, it's going to take twice as long to get down as it did for them to get up.
Kieran, thank you. You and Kennedy have done a fine job. We've lost the pictures of the SRBs, unfortunately. Let's look in animation then at what has just...
42 nautical miles downrange. Mark 2 minutes, 50 seconds. Columbia, you're looking a little hot. All your calls will be a little early. Okay. Columbia now has 2-engine rotor capability. Mark 3 minutes. Young and Crippen really moving out now. Velocity now reading 6,200 feet per second.
The next major call will be at 4 minutes.
15 seconds. Columbia now 51 nautical miles in altitude, 66 nautical miles downrange. Velocity now reading 6,500 feet per second.
Well, that was the picture of the Columbia. It's not the latest picture. They had just to freeze it there because I think one of the cameras up top isn't working properly. But so far, it's a good liftoff.
Yes, it's been excellent. The trajectory is a little bit off, but you always expect a few dispersions. But in general, I'd say they're 99.5% on the mark.
And for a new machine.
And for a new machine. They just got a press to MECO, which means continue on to the main engine cutoff, so they've gone through most of their difficult parts.
Now, when the main engine cuts off, they've still got to use the maneuvering system to get into the proper orbit. Is that right?
Yes, yes. We'll hear their call here.
Flying forward, coming up on negative return. Press for MECO. Roger, press for MECO.
Press for MECO means continue on to the main engine cutoff, and that puts them in very good position at this point.
Mark 4 minutes, 8. Columbia, stand by for negative return. Mark, negative return.
Negative return means that now they will not have to go back to the launch site, but they can continue on.
So they now do one orbit anyway.
Yes.
Capcom, Brandon Stein, Columbia now committed to space travel. Young and Crippen can no longer turn around and return to the launch site.
Columbia, Houston, we're showing both ohms PT transducers off scale high.
Mark, 4 minutes, 45 seconds. The flash evaporator is activated on board to cool Columbia.
Off scale low here.
Okay, sounds like they have an indicator problem.
Roger, stand by. We'll keep an eye on it.
Mark, 4 minutes, 56 seconds. Columbia is lofting early in the second stage, is now being taken out of the trajectory as programmed. Columbia now 74 nautical miles in altitude, 181 nautical miles down.
What a view.
They've just pitched down so they can see the horizon out the front window.
5 minutes, 15 seconds. Columbia now 75 nautical miles in altitude, 202 nautical miles downrange. Velocity now reading 11,000 feet per second.
We're trying to hold with them, but we can't keep the picture.
Status check and mission control by Flight Director Neil Hutchinson.
Indicator problems can come at any time.
5:30,
Yeah.
Miko, 8+34.
That says that
Mark, 5 minutes, 40 seconds. That call up from Capcom Brandon Stein says that Columbia's trajectory, navigation, and engine performance look good.
Columbia, reading you loud and clear. Okay, you're clear, a little weak.
Mark, 5 minutes, 55
And
seconds.
Columbia, we just switched over Bermuda. Boy should be getting better here in a second. Roger that. Okay, that's good.
6 minutes. Columbia now 76 nautical miles in altitude, 280 nautical miles downrange. Velocity now reading 13,000 feet per second.
Columbia, Houston, could we have the cryo heaters, please? And Columbia, your single engine rota.
Mark, 6 minutes, 25 seconds. That call up from Capcom Brandon Stein says that if 2-engine failure occurred, Columbia is capable of an emergency landing at Rotor Naval Air Station, Spain. Mark, 6 minutes, 40 seconds. Columbia pitching over now, diving to increase velocity, decrease altitude, giving Columbia her most favorable attitude. Columbia now 72 nautical miles in altitude, 373 nautical miles downrange. Velocity now reading 16,400 feet per second.
they need about 25,000 feet per second to get into orbit, so he's getting close.
Standing by for a single-engine Presto Miko call up from Capcom Brandon Stein.
That call will mean they can get into orbit with only one engine out of the three they have.
So that's an engineering triumph.
Yeah.
Columbia, your single engine, press per Miko.
Mark, 7 minutes, 20 seconds. That report says that Young and Crippen can achieve orbital insertion even if 2 engines go out. Mark, 7 minutes, 30 seconds. Columbia, 67 nautical miles in altitude, 485 nautical miles downrange. G-force is building for Young and Crippen now up to 3 Gs.
And they'll reach about a maximum of 5 Gs before they get into orbit.
Mark, 7
And
minutes,
there's the cape that they
45
left, and we'll be
Yes.
back.
Columbia's main engine slowly being throttled back now. Should be throttled at 65% at 6 seconds before main engine cutoff. Status check in the control center.
Columbia, Houston, your go at 8.
Mark, 8 minutes, 4 seconds.
Looking good.
30 seconds to go.
Columbia now 63 nautical miles in altitude, 606 nautical miles downrange. Mark, 8 minutes, 15 seconds. Columbia now 63 nautical miles in altitude, 650 nautical miles downrange. Standing by now for main engine cutoff.
Launch control looked happy.
Oh, yes, very.
Miko 25670 up at 220 feet per second.
Perfect.
Roger,
Perfect.
Columbia, Miko.
Confirmed shutdown. Columbia, the gem of this new ocean, now in space, not yet in orbit. Now standing by now for external tank separation.
Their parameters that Bob Crippen read out were very good.
Roger, and we confirm the SEP, Columbia.
They have separated from the
9
external
minutes,
tank.
3 seconds.
And that falls down in the Indian
External
Ocean
tank
somewhere.
separation.
No, that will, yes, eventually, yes.
Columbia now performing an evasive maneuver, moving below and beyond and translating to the north of the external tank. Young should see it moving away out his window.
we should get a call from Young when he sees the tank, as they have now separated. And he makes a maneuver to get away from it so that when they relight their engines, the smaller engines, they won't run into it.
9 minutes 40 seconds, go no-go status check and mission control for the first Ohms burn.
That's the first burn of the smaller engines.
Columbia, Houston, your go for nominal Ohms 1 and for APU shutdown on time.
That means their orbit is very good, no corrections are needed.
55 seconds. Columbia now maneuvering to its Ohms 1 burn attitude. Using the 26,000-pound thrust engine, the Ohms 1 will be posigrade, moving Columbia forward and higher on her flight path, placing Columbia in orbit. Standing by for ignition, 10 minutes, 22 seconds.
So with the Columbia well on her way, looking perfect, you were saying, Dave?
Oh yes, I think the numbers that Bob Crippen read down to us when they got into orbit were just excellent, just very, very good.
We'll just see the liftoff again. Wouldn't go on Friday, but went today as if there'd never been any problem at all.
America's first space shuttle, and the shuttle has cleared the tower.
And we'll be back in just a couple of minutes.
On the butcher for beef, normally it's not very fat. But
had to be on the scene somewhere.
Oh, good, I'm glad you're there.
Well, sort of like the old times, wasn't it?
Oh, yes. A lot of people were asking about you on Friday down there.
Well, I had hoped to get down, but one thing and another led me to get here close enough in the studio so we could get first-hand reports of what's going on.
Great, I'm glad you're there with ITN.
Well, listen, I look forward to seeing you when we can get together soon.
Okay, Dave.
Here's Alistair back. Talk to you soon.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much. Thanks very much, Jim Owen. We'll look forward to seeing you later on in the week. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, now, Jeff, now that the Apollo reunion is over, the engineering, in fact, worked terribly well, but there were problems, aerodynamic problems with getting all that kind of machinery up off the ground for the first time.
There are difficulties, but they didn't seem to be difficulties in the event. But the thing that the crew would have experienced just before liftoff was what's known as the twang effect. When the three main engines on the shuttle vehicle itself were lit, and they were lit about six seconds before the actual liftoff, they had the effect of pushing the whole shuttle structure about 40 inches in the direction of the tank. And then that movement had to swing back towards the vertical before they could actually lift off. That swinging back effect, augmented by the firing of the solid rocket boosters, is what was called the twang, but it didn't seem to worry them at all.
Fine. And it seems still to be going fine?
Yes, everything's going fine.
Except for unfortunate people in the Indian Ocean, little bits of metal raining down on them, maybe, if that fuel tank doesn't break up properly.
Oh, yes, but it'll pretty well disperse, and it's in a very sparse part of the ocean.
Well, now, we'll have a look at the two astronauts, Young and Crippen, from earlier today. Here's Norman Reese.
Now by
500,000 gallons of liquid hydrogen and oxygen. At 2:25 a.m. local time, with the countdown going perfectly, launch controllers gave permission to wake the crew. So it was another pre-launch breakfast of steak and eggs for astronauts Young and Crippen. "Hello, Mum," Crippen said to the cameras as he faced his first trip into space.
The cabin pressure is...
Flight Commander John Young, the veteran of 4 previous space flights, was the first to test his helmet on the pressurized spacesuits the crew wear during launch and landing of the shuttle. The crew were relaxed and smiling as they left the suiting room for the 3.5-mile drive through the night to the launch pad. Then the trip to the top of Columbia and entry to the flight deck through the access arm on the left. If either of them were feeling any doubts, it wasn't showing, and Bob Crippen gave the final wave as he entered the spaceship.
Last sight of them for quite a while, perhaps as many as 36 orbits if all goes well. 54.5 hours the mission will be if it's a success, as it seems to be at the moment very much. Well, now, Geoffrey Archer, that's one of the most difficult moments over. When's the next difficult moment? Re-entry, I suppose.
Well, there are still some to come, but one of the critical ones is going to be re-entry. And one of the major problems in developing the shuttle has been the task of designing a heat shield which could be used 100 times as the shuttle itself is meant to be used. And the shield is necessary because when the shuttle orbiter comes back into the atmosphere, it comes in at a speed of about 16,000 miles an hour. And a tremendous amount of heat is built up, mostly on the underside of the craft, going up to a temperature of about 1,500 degrees centigrade. Well, they came to the conclusion that the best way to deal with that was to arrange a system of tiles to cover the shuttle. And these tiles are made of a silica fiber material, which is very heat resistant, and there are about 31,000 of them altogether on the shuttle. This is one of them here. It's one that was designed for one part of the shuttle but didn't fit exactly. It's very, very light in weight. You can see this silica fiber material underneath, and it's coated with a ceramic material. And that we hope those tiles will stay on when the orbiter comes back into the atmosphere, because otherwise the craft itself could be damaged.
But it's a reassuring moment at the moment. After all the delays, years of delay, in fact, that hiccup on Friday, you were very philosophical about it, Dave. Well, now, a triumph.
Yes, and I think it's really a spectacular launch for a first flight. You have to remember that this has never been done with a winged vehicle before. And to have the success in the orbital parameters, or that is where they are in orbit now, on the first flight is just spectacular. I think it's a major achievement for them.
Indeed, it's probably better than some of the early systems were in their first flight. I mean, much
yes,
simpler ones.
Definitely. As a matter of fact, it appears to be better than some of the early systems were on their later flights.
And you speak with experience of that.
Well, yes, it was difficult to hit the precise orbital parameters that they've hit. And again, you must remember we have a winged vehicle going up there. So I think it's a real achievement.
So what do you think now? You think they will try to go for the full 36 orbits?
Oh, yes, definitely. I think it's in good shape. There are no major problems. There are no little problems even that I've heard. And I think they'll go all the way through the 54 hours, and we hope to see a super good landing, too.
And this is therefore the start of really quite a big step out there in space. Now, the Russians are up there. They've had a craft up there for a month now, and there was talk earlier today that they might be sending somebody else up in order to steal some of America's thunder. That hasn't happened.
No, and we must remember that they're dealing with equipment that was designed and developed years ago, and now we're taking another step into the cutting edge of technology with a vehicle which will enable us to really exploit space and utilize it properly.
And the next shuttle then is what, 5 months from now?
If all goes well on this one, yes, approximately 4 or 5 months.
If all goes well with Columbia, as it seems to be doing right now. Well, I suppose Columbia might have been called the reluctant debutante on Friday afternoon. It was the computers, not the craft, that went wrong. And computers have gone wrong before. But all goes well now. And we'll be giving you reports of how Columbia is getting on through the day on ITN News. So that's the flight of the Columbia, the first true spaceship, the Space Shuttle, now well on its way. Good afternoon. Thank you for coming in. Thank you. Very good.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. We've gone for main engine start. We have main engine start. The shuttle has cleared the tower.
Because of that special programme from ITN covering the launch of the Space Shuttle from Cape Canaveral, we'll be showing numbers at work at a later date.
The shuttle is all ready to go at exactly
1 o'clock British summer time.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. We've gone for main engine start. We have main engine start.
The shuttle has cleared the tower.
And it all went perfectly. Astronauts Young and Crippen have now put the shuttle into orbit. They're due to go round the Earth 36 times and carry out various tests before returning to Earth at about 7:30 our time on Tuesday evening.
The American Space Shuttle.
We've gone for main engine start. We have main engine start.
Good afternoon from the Columbia studio. We're looking now at the pictures that came to us just after 1 o'clock this afternoon as the American Space Shuttle made a successful first test launch. After many delays and last-minute frustrations, Columbia was on her way. Well, the launch went perfectly. In fact, things in general seem pretty good. Both astronauts are in good shape. Crippen's heart rate hit 130 on liftoff, but don't forget it's his first space flight. And the experienced John Young reported wobble at main engine cutoff. That's the moment 8 minutes and 32 seconds into the mission as the external tank is emptied and was jettisoned. But we have just received our first pictures from space from the cameras on board Columbia, which confirm that these large payload bay doors have successfully been opened in space for the first time. These are the vital heat radiators to keep Columbia cool. But the pictures also reveal that during liftoff, Columbia lost some of her heat shield.
We want to show you our pods here. We do have a few tiles missing off of both of them. Off of the starboard pod, it's got basically what appears to be 3 tile and some smaller pieces. And off the port pod, looks like I see one full square and looks like a few little triangular shapes that are missing. And we're trying to put that on TV right now.
Roger, Grip, we can see that good.
Well, the pictures are clear enough. This is what they're talking about. This is one of the tiles designed to form the vital heat shield of the spacecraft. This, though not important at the moment, will be absolutely vital when Columbia makes her re-entry to the Earth's atmosphere, because it is this and the 30,000 tiles like it which will prevent the spacecraft overheating and burning up. Geoffrey Pardo, let me pass that across to you and ask you how significant you feel the loss of the part of the heat shield at any rate might be.
This is one of the high-temperature tiles, actually, and the one we're talking about is coloured white. It's the same material, but it's about 1 inch thick. I think it's interesting just to sort of have a look again where it is. That is the view that we saw, and the tiles are missing 8-inch square tiles just there and just there. Now, the significance, of course, is that the doors are closed like that for re-entry, and in those circumstances, the temperature is now as on this profile here. That is the centre line of the shuttle, looking down on it so far as this down here is concerned. And that little yellow piece there, the light-coloured piece, that is where the temperature is moderate, up to 650 degrees centigrade, in fact. So it's not a critical heating area, such as the underside. For example, this shows the underside heating, and here the very deep red, the dark part, that is where the temperature really builds up. So, at the moment, the temperature isn't critical to there. It doesn't represent a problem, but what really is a problem is there an implication that the vibration on the way up and the general effects have loosened not only the tiles you can see, but the tiles you can't, underneath. Now, for that, they are going through a very careful analysis of the liftoff film to see if they can see anything coming off. Secondly, they're looking at the telemetry, the sensors, the things which measure just what the temperature is on the structure underneath, to see if there's any hot spots which suggests a problem. They're even considering using very high-resolution optical system, a camera, a telescope, looking from the ground up. They could rotate it, of course, and look at that side. I think the resolution
Because, of course, at the moment, Columbia is actually flying with her bottom, as it were, away from the Earth.
They could, of course, rotate, but I think that's pushing it a bit. At the moment, Geoffrey,
thank you. Let's, forgive me interrupting you, let's now see if we can pick up Kieran live at the Cape for the very latest news on the tile situation. Are you there, Kieran?
Hello, Michael, yes. Well, despite the loss of those tiles, NASA tell us that they have no plans to cut short the mission at the moment, despite that loss, and they're rather tending to play the whole thing down. Lockheed, who made the tiles, are saying, well, it's nothing to do with us, talk to Rockwell, who stuck them on. Now, although NASA aren't taking the whole thing desperately seriously, at least they're not worrying too much about it at the moment, Rockwell are being pursued by half the world's press out here. There's only one man so far that we've seen from Rockwell, where there were a good deal more before. He keeps disappearing in and out of doors, and so far he hasn't given us much information, presumably because he doesn't have very much.
Kieran, thank you very much indeed. No, thank you, that's fine. More from you as it comes, but for the meanwhile, thank you. So, NASA playing the whole thing down at the moment. Well, as I said to Kieran, news as it comes in, no serious problems at the moment, though we have to report that some of the vital heat shield has been lost on liftoff. Now, if Columbia lands on schedule, that will be just after 7 p.m. Tuesday evening, our time. We will be here with, of course, full coverage, and in the meantime, we'll be watching for any updates between then and now. But on this historic space afternoon, that's all we have for you at the moment, from all of us in the Columbia studio. Goodbye for now.
Early morning on pad 39A. Take 2 for the launch of the Columbia, for the pilot, Bob Crippen, and for the commander, John Young. From the breakfast to the suiting up, to the later pre-flight routines, everything was just as it had been 48 hours before, but this time, even more encouragement from their colleagues at Cape Canaveral. And another difference. This time, the computers on the Columbia were on speaking terms with each other. And so, to the final moments of the countdown, and the voice was the voice of launch control.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. We've gone for main engine start. We have main engine start. America's first space shuttle. And the shuttle has cleared the tower.
And here was the turn, as the spaceship Columbia, now on her back, marched out over the Atlantic. Two minutes after liftoff, and according to plan, the solid rocket boosters broke away in 2 balls of fire. A little over an hour later, the first pictures of the shuttle in space were received, the view from the payload door.
We do have a few tiles missing off of both of them. Off of the starboard pod, it's got basically what appears to be 3 tile and some smaller pieces.
These are not critical tiles. These tiles that are missing represent no hazard to the vehicle or the crew. The worst that can happen is that after landing, a small patch of skin underneath the tiles may have to be replaced.
And on the ground, where the problems with the tiles were not yet known, the mood was jubilation.
Prince Charles has arrived in
was missing. The shuttle is now in its 4th orbit, somewhere over Australia.
20 seconds and counting.
It refused to go on Friday, but today, Columbia, the $9 billion spacecraft that took 10 years to develop, went up like a dream.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. We've gone for main engine start. We have main engine start. America's first space shuttle. And the shuttle has cleared the tower.
Two minutes and 12 seconds into the launch, just before it went out of sight of the cameras, the orbiter jettisoned its 2 solid rocket boosters. They later parachuted into the Atlantic Ocean to be used again.
Roger on the SIP, Columbia. Mark, 2 minutes, 20 seconds. Confirm solid rocket booster SIP. Station.
On the ground, there were handshakes all round as the fuel tank was jettisoned and Columbia went successfully into orbit. But the first black and white pictures from the orbiter after its cargo doors were opened gave a hint of possible trouble.
We want to show you our home pods here. We do have a few tiles missing off of both of them. Off of the starboard pod, it's got basically what appears to be 3 tile and some smaller pieces. And off the port pod, looks like I see one full square and looks like a few little triangular shapes that are missing. And we're trying to put that on TV right now. Roger, Crip, we can see that good.
The 14 heat-resistant tiles that have fallen off the shuttle are similar to this one, only somewhat thinner. They've come off these pods which house the small orbital manoeuvring engines each side of the tail. During re-entry to the Earth's atmosphere, these pods are sheltered by the shuttle wings from most of the heat generated. And that's why Mission Control has said the tile loss is not dangerous. But the worry is that tiles in more critical areas, such as the underside, could have fallen off too. The crew can't see the underside of the shuttle, so they don't know. But mission scientists think it's unlikely. The rocket pods at the tail stick out and would have met more air resistance on liftoff than the smooth underside of the shuttle.
Final project beset with so many delays, frustrations, cost overruns, that the delight of the crowd at the moment of final launch was extraordinary as soon as they saw that it was going well. And this was how they reacted. Former astronaut Neil Armstrong, the first man on the moon.
Well, it was a beautiful sight, and we're delighted it's going so well, and I understand that it's good. There's nothing wrong at the present time, and that's always a great surprise to the crew. They usually expect a few things going wrong.
And George Page, the launch director.
Hey, next time you all ought to buy flags and bring them. It's a proud day for America, too.
Martin Bell, BBC, at the Kennedy Space Center.
Justification for flag waving and applause in that successful launch. But there is still the nagging problem of the heat-resistant tiles. This is typical of the 30,000 individually shaped tiles that cover much of Columbia. It's an extraordinary material. You can hold it in your bare hands on one side, while the other side is red hot. Now, we know from those in-flight television shots that a number have come off the engine pods here and here. NASA engineers seem certain that this represents no threat to the safety of the flight, but an hour ago they were using high-resolution cameras on aircraft to try to scan the underside of the orbiter, where the astronauts can't see, to check that all the tiles there are still in position. The tiles are an incredibly complex solution to the problem of protecting the orbiter. Today's problem emphasizes the fact that if they really want this to be a commercially successful space transport system, they'd better start looking for a different solution. No scientist or industrialist is going to be very keen on risking investment or equipment if it's not going to be properly protected against the appalling heat that's generated when the orbiter comes back into the Earth's atmosphere. This will be the most dangerous part of the journey.
There's been more...
Page read them a message from President Reagan.
Through you today, we all feel as giants once again. Once again, we feel the surge of pride that comes from knowing we are the first and we are the best, and we are so because we are free. For all Americans, Nancy and I thank you and the thousands of others who have worked to make this day possible.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. We've gone for main engine start. We have main engine start. America's first space shuttle. And
thrilled and we're proud today. There you go. Where are your flags? Hey, next time you all ought to buy flags and bring them. It's a proud day for America, too. Hey, I've been on a lot of first launches. I've been in this business for 20-plus years, and I never felt anything like today, and Looking around that firing room, there are a lot of old guys, old veterans in there that I'm sure never felt anything like today. It was fantastic.
But there was trouble ahead. When Columbia opened up its cargo doors, the onboard cameras spotted gaps in the heat-resistant tiles. Some had been shaken off during the launch.
Hey, we want to show you our own pods here. We do have a few tiles missing off of both of them. Off of the starboard pod, it's got basically what appears to be 3 tile and some smaller pieces. And off the port pod, looks like I see 1 full square and looks like a few little triangular shapes that are missing. And we're trying to put that on TV right now. Roger, Crip, we can see that good.
Despite the missing tiles, though, Mission Control announced it was all systems go for Columbia's full mission, 36 orbits.
Give it a go to stay on orbit, and Columbia, Houston, you guys did so good, we're going to let you stay up there for a couple of days. You're go for on orbit.
Norman Reese, ITN, at the Kennedy Space Center.
The 14 heat up there now. Would you be worried about these missing tiles?
Well, no, Jeffrey, I wouldn't be worried. I'd be aware of what's going on and concerned that we would have to find a solution. But there are 2 days to work on it, and I believe we can understand the problem within those 2 days. In my opinion, this is an interesting situation, and as the air flows across the model onto the pods, this vertical part of the tail creates what we call a shock wave. And it's possible that this shock wave has impinged or hit on the pods, and that, coupled with the pressure going through launch and the heat of launch, may have dislodged those few tiles, whereas on the bottom part, where it's smooth and there's no impingement, it may be sound and secure as they were when they launched.
Isn't that, though, something that would have been calculated in tests beforehand?
Yes, it would have been calculated, but it's very difficult to predict exactly aerodynamic effects because they are what we call non-linear. There are always a few surprises with new airplanes.
Well, now, if, just suppose, they were to find 1 or 2 tiles missing on the underside here, what could be done to minimize the effects both on the astronauts and on the equipment inside?
Well, one thing that can be done, they know where systems are dispersed underneath the side, different systems. Each system is redundant, and therefore if a tile were missing on one wing over here, they could re-enter using the system on the other side and therefore protect against the heating effect of the system that was then not used.
So they shouldn't be too worried?
No, they shouldn't be too worried. I think they'll work it out and we'll have a nice re-entry.
Thank you very much.
24 hours after launch. The mission was nearly halfway through, and the astronauts were back over Cape Canaveral, giving America as clear a view of them as they had of it.
Okay, John and Crip, and that is excellent television we're getting. Yeah, those are really super cameras. I knew it was going to make John a star here.
There was a checklist manual free-floating in the cabin and a minor problem with a pressure valve. But in general, the astronauts have been enjoying a trouble-free ride and a view from the windows of the spaceship Columbia of the world spinning by at 17,000 miles an hour.
We've got a beautiful picture of the Earth below through your windows now. Roger that. That's a fantastic view. Oh, we'll leave that on for you for a while.
On the second televised orbit of the day, the pictures from a remote-controlled camera mounted in the payload bay were also of the United States, and Mission Control admired them.
We're looking at some real pretty pictures as you pass over the northeast of the United States.
Yeah, beautiful shot of the Cape Cod up there.
Mission Control also had a beautiful view of the spaceship itself and the damage done during yesterday's ascent. A total of 15 tiles damaged or missing, 11 on one side, 4 on the other. Mission Controller Neil Hutchinson was asked what was the worst thing that could happen because of this on re-entry.
Nothing.
The Columbia's crew aren't worried either. The spaceship, according to its commander, is performing like a champ. Martin Bell, BBC, at the Kennedy Space Center.
And that's our view of the news from London this evening, early this evening rather.
Not have seen. Oh, we saw it. Well, let's see. We're coming over. Yeah, there we go. I got the runway and the VAB in sight. Very good. It's exactly 24 hours ago. You've been there for 1 day now. We've got a beautiful picture of the Earth below through your windows now. Roger that.
Color pictures from Columbia were among the best ever received from space.
Yeah, those are really super cameras. I knew it was going to make John a star here.
The crew had one or two minor problems, including cold air in the cabin. But when they were able to put the problem right, Crippen told the ground he was now so warm he had to take off his jacket.
Roger, that's what happens when you start working hard, I guess.
I wouldn't really call this working hard.
Meanwhile, NASA scientists have been looking at higher definition pictures of the tiles missing from Columbia's tail pods. They're continuing, though, to play down their importance.
What is the worst possible thing that could happen, in your estimation, during re-entry as a result of this tile loss?
Nothing.
Nonetheless, mission controllers are now scanning pictures of yesterday's launch to see if they can detect any tiles flying off the shuttle. They even plan to photograph the orbiter with top-secret military cameras as it passes over Florida and Hawaii. All to answer the vital question, are any tiles missing from the vital heat seals underneath the spacecraft? Norman Reese, ITN, at the Kennedy Space Center.
You'll be able to watch the shuttle landing live.
We've been carrying out a series of tests designed to bring their space shuttle safely home tomorrow night. One problem, though, remains unsolved. American Air Force planes have been trying to photograph the craft to see if vital heat-resistant tiles underneath are all still intact. But so far, clouds have got in their way. Today, for the astronauts, there were few clouds obscuring the view of Earth. The pictures they sent back were spectacular, as our correspondent Martin Bell reports.
The first shirt-sleeved astronauts in a pressurized cabin with the world spinning by them at 17,000 miles an hour have been enjoying the view.
We've got a beautiful picture of the Earth below through your windows now. Roger that.
As the Columbia passed over the United States, American television viewers saw Crippen and Young in all sorts of positions.
The only bad part about it, Joe, is we're going to have to come down. Well, don't come down in that attitude.
Here in the middeck, they took a call from the White House.
Oh, Mr. Vice President.
Hey, who's that, John?
Yes, sir.
How you doing?
We're just having a lot of fun up here.
Hey, listen, I'm glad to talk to both you and Cripp. How's he behaving?
I'm trying to behave pretty well, Mr. Vice President.
Well, everybody views it, I'm sure, just as the forerunner of great things to come. I mean, it's one of the, I think your trip is just going to ignite the excitement and the forward thinking from this country, so I really just wanted to call up and wish you the very best. Sitting right behind my desk is that model you gave me down there, and also the picture of you two guys, and it was there before this phone call, too.
Well, we appreciate it, Mr. Vice President.
All right, back to work, but it's great talking to you. And best of luck. We'll be watching that re-entry and the landing with great interest. On behalf of the whole country, I'll tell you, everybody will be.
Thank you very much, sir.
So long, Bob. So long, John. Good talking to you. Best of luck.
Back here at the launch site, the now empty Pad 39A, workers have been cleaning up. But none of the Columbia's missing tiles has been found here. The loss of these tiles is not viewed as serious by the space agency or by the astronauts. The bird can fly. According to its commander, the first winged spaceship is performing like a champ. Martin Bell, BBC, at the Kennedy Space Center.
And on an airstrip in the Mojave Desert in California tomorrow evening. They took some time off today to show the world what it's like on board Columbia and how the Earth looks to them. These are the pictures.
This morning, the crew switched on their cabin camera, and from their vantage point, more than 150 miles up, were given a reminder of yesterday's spectacular launch.
See Cape Kennedy, perhaps. There's a tremendous launch from there yesterday, which you may not have seen.
Oh, we saw it. Well, let's see. We're coming over. Yeah, there we go. I got the runway and the VAB in sight.
Very good. It's exactly 24 hours ago. You've been there for 1 day now. We've got a beautiful picture of the Earth below through your windows now.
Roger that.
Color pictures from Columbia were among the best ever received from space.
Yeah, those are really super cameras. I knew it was going to make John a star here.
Meanwhile, NASA scientists have been looking at higher definition pictures of the tiles missing from Columbia's tail pods, but they're continuing to play down their importance. Nonetheless, out on empty launch pad 39A at the Kennedy Space Center, NASA engineers were today looking for debris of the tiles shed from Columbia. So scanning pictures of yesterday's launch to see if any tiles can be detected flying off the shuttle. NASA plans to photograph the orbiter with top-secret military cameras as it passes over Florida and Hawaii, all to answer the vital question, are any tiles missing from the vital heat seal underneath the spacecraft? This afternoon, Young and Crippen went down to the living quarters of Columbia to take a telephone call from Vice President George Bush.
Hey, who's that, John?
He was standing in for the injured President Reagan from the White House. Mr. Bush made a joke about Bob Crippen's heartbeat, recorded on takeoff at 130 beats a minute, and then expressed the sentiments of the whole country, maybe with those missing tiles in mind.
All right, back to work, but it's great talking to you. And best of luck. We'll be watching that re-entry and the landing with great interest. On behalf of the whole country, I'll tell you, everybody will be.
From their outside cameras in the cargo bay, Young and Crippen continue to feed down spectacular pictures of Earth. These over Bermuda and the Atlantic Ocean.
Pass over the northeast of the United States.
They also went through the standard displays of astronauts enjoying the weightlessness of space. It would all be a very happy picture, would it not for those nagging doubts about the heat shield tiles. Norman Reese, News at 10 at the Kennedy Space Center.
They seem pretty confident at the Houston Space Center that the only place the tiles are loose or missing is just here, on top of the tail, and not underneath, where the full heat of around 2,700 degrees Fahrenheit will hit tomorrow night. The two astronauts have now traveled over 250,000 miles, and they've beamed back some of the clearest pictures yet of the Earth and of themselves. Tonight we saw them talking to America's Vice President George Bush.
Hey, who's that, John? How you doing?
We're just having a lot of fun up here.
Hey, listen, I'm glad to talk to both you and Cripp. How's he behaving?
I'm trying to behave pretty well, Mr. Vice President.
Well, everybody views it, I'm sure, just as the forerunner of great things to come. I mean, it's one of the, I think your trip is just going to ignite the excitement and the forward thinking from this country, so I really just wanted to call up and wish you the very best. Sitting right behind my desk is that model you gave me down there, and also the picture of you two guys, and it was there before this phone call, too.
Well, we appreciate it, Mr. Vice President.
All right, back to work, but it's great talking to you.
This is the flight deck looking over Bob Crippen's shoulder at John Young. You might mistake it for a routine airline cockpit scene if it weren't for that logbook floating around.
Okay, we've got a good picture, Crip. Okay, that's the TV status report. The flight so far has gone as smooth as it could possibly go. We've done every test that we're supposed to do, and we're up on the timeline, and the vehicle has just been performing beautifully, much better than anyone ever expected to do on a first flight, and no systems are out of shape. Okay, John, sure, we appreciate those comments. We're going to switch to the back now, and Crip's going to tell you how things went in the back of the ship. And Crip, for info, your mother and Jenny and the girls are all in the viewing room watching. Oh, my gracious. Okay, we're switching over to the aft camera here. Now we're showing the aft deck. How does that picture look to you? It's coming in real good. Okay, Hank. I'd like to echo John's words that I usually do. I guess being the so-called rookie on this flight, I had a thrill from the moment of liftoff all the way up to what we're doing now. It's really been super. The spacecraft has worked as advertised all the way along. A few little minor new problems, but nothing of significance. I guess the major one you guys are working on down there is dealing with some of our instrumentation. But I think we've got something that's really going to mean something to the country and the world.
Through the cockpit window, the world could be seen spinning past Columbia in a blaze of color at 17,000 miles an hour. At one stage, Young said he could clearly see the American naval base in Spain, which had been one of their emergency landing places. Another camera in the orbiter's payload bay behind their cabin had a clear view out of the open doors at the Earth's surface 170 miles below.
We're looking at some real pretty pictures as you pass over the northeast of the United States.
Beautiful shot of Cape Cod up there.
And at the far end of the payload bay, those dark gaps in the tiles, which led newsmen to ask this morning if there were any other tiles missing or loose.
The answer is no. And quite frankly, we're not worried about any other tiles being loose. The phenomenon that took them off, and this is pure supposition at this time, gosh, you know, we're just now trying to regroup and understand what might have done it, but it's fairly obvious it probably was some kind of shock wave, an ascent that we didn't anticipate, and
to watch the fascinating results as they're sent back from space.
But it's the imagination of the younger children that the Royal Aeronautical Society hope to capture. Here in Bristol, they're coordinating a competition where schools all over Britain can compete for space in the Space Lab. They won't have much room, but it'll be enough to carry out simple experiments. All the children have to do is think of what they'd like to find out. For instance, how roots grow when there's no gravity. The finalists will get expert help in perfecting their schemes, and the winning idea should be ready for liftoff by 1984.
Well, Terence Murter in Belfast, naturally there's great enthusiasm among scientists like yourself, but is this really the golden opportunity you've been waiting for?
I think most people will be looking toward the Space Shuttle to bring in a new era of space exploitation. You see, I think most people concerned with the space program are hoping that the shuttle will be to space what the railways were to the Industrial Revolution. What we're looking forward to is not only a new era of scientific investigation of the heavens, but a new era in which we can use space and the space environment for relatively complex and I think very interesting industrial and earthbound applications.
Now, what kind of experiments are the scientists going to be carrying out on the shuttle?
Well, certainly a lot of the astronomers will be very keen to have placed in orbit the Large Astronomical Telescope. This will be a huge instrument, a new eye in the sky, and with this, astronomers hope to be able to see right into the depths of the more distant galaxies. Perhaps we might even be able to spot planets going around other stars, and who knows, we might even be able to have a look and see if such things as black holes exist.
And what about talk of experiments researching into new kinds of metals, for example?
Yes, in the zero-G environment, that is the weightlessness environment, and using the European-built Space Lab, certainly engineers and technologists are hoping to generate a whole new range of alloys and things, for example, like foamed steel that are not simply possible on Earth. And even such mundane objects as, say, ball bearings could perhaps be manufactured more effectively, more efficiently, and probably cheaper in space.
Are there any grounds for worry that there may be less of a scientific commitment and slightly more of a defence commitment to this project than people have feared?
Well, I don't know about worrying about it, but we do know that the American Air Force have booked about 30% of the Space Shuttle flights. But it's not for anything, I think, too secret. What they'll be using it for will be the launch of a huge space surveillance satellite that they call Big Boy. Now, Big Boy, I think, is the one that they use today to photograph the backside of the Space Shuttle. And, you know, it's so good, I suspect it could read number plates at the Kremlin. And I don't think any of us should worry about what's going on up there, except the Big Boy happens to be flying over the fields. Don't do anything that you shouldn't be doing.
Well, how soon are we going to get passengers up in space? Because there's no effort to land at the moment, is there?
Well, no, I must admit that the day when most of us can travel in the Space Shuttle is just a wee bit far off. But interestingly enough, about a year ago when I was in Washington at one of the NASA studios, I was in there and I saw on an artist's pad a sketch for a payload bay contraption. I would call it a giant space bus. And there were individual seats and windows.
Fascinating.
So someone's thinking about going into space.
I have to end you there. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you and goodbye.
Frank.
Of the return of the Space Shuttle.
6, 5, 4. We've gone for main engine start. We have main engine start.
They're on their way back, but they're not home yet. This is Mission Control, and we're waiting now for confirmation that Columbia, carrying astronauts Young and Crippen, has gone into the eeriest part of her mission, the radio blackout. This is caused by the intense heat from growing air resistance as she re-enters the Earth's atmosphere. Let's listen to the live sound coming from Mission Control to confirm that this important stage has been reached.
Systems operator, Jim McClanahan, mission director, Don Oishi, telescope systems operator.
One can only conclude that NASA are filling, and I as yet have no confirmation that radio blackout has been reached. When it takes place, I have confirmation that it has taken place. Columbia has silently slipped into that eerie stage in the mission, and we will all wait for some 15 minutes, which is obviously why NASA are filling with their commentary for the end of that blackout and news that all is well with the returning spacecraft. Columbia in blackout, on her way back to Earth. So it looks as though Young and Crippen are on their way back. 35 minutes or so ago, Houston confirmed the flight crew had turned the orbiter around using those tiny thruster rockets so that she was orbiting backwards. Then the orbital maneuvering system, the two small rockets at the tail of the spacecraft, were fired for the last time on this mission to slow the spacecraft down, allowing gravity to draw her towards the Earth. Right now, she's on her final flight path, which will take her over Guam, over the Central Pacific and Wake Island, heading for a landfall some 25 minutes or so from now, here in the Californian desert at the Dryden Flight Research Center alongside Edwards Air Force Base. And Kieran Prenderville will be reporting to us from there in just a few minutes. Now, this is a most disconcerting part of the mission, because as Columbia entered the atmosphere at 25 times the speed of sound, the intense heat caused by the growing air resistance cast an electromagnetic shield around the spacecraft, and it is this which cuts off all radio contact. For 14 minutes or so, Houston and the rest of us will have no idea what is happening to Columbia as she falls back to Earth at over 100 feet per second, glowing red hot. Now, assuming all is going well, and I'm being assured by NASA that there's no reason why it shouldn't, within 23 minutes now, she'll be on the ground at Edwards in California. Waiting there is Kieran Prenderville. What's the mood in California, Kieran?
Well, it may sound a bit fanciful to talk about how you can feel tension, but out here right now, you almost can. Because very shortly, the heat shield tiles get a chance to do their stuff. We're told that they're still all on, but even if they are, will they really work? And even if they do, can Columbia really plummet from 150 miles up down to a safe landing on a dried-up lake bed without any engines? Well, we're all keeping our fingers crossed out here, because the astronauts only have one chance and one chance alone to get this right without any power, and everyone knows it. We'll be back to you soon.
Right. Indeed you will. This really is the nastiest moment of the mission, because as well as radio silence, the heat created by re-entry puts a tremendous strain on Columbia's thermal protection system, the now famous tiles. 2 years ago, NASA realized it had a problem with the 30,000 or so silica tiles. Tests indicated that under the stress of liftoff, some of these tiles, vital to the orbiter if she's to prove herself as a reusable spacecraft, would simply not remain stuck to the spacecraft's aluminium fuselage. Pull tests were carried out on the crucial ones. Those that failed were strengthened with a special silica slurry and were rebonded. This time, NASA said the tiles would work, would stand the stress of re-entry. Well, the ability of this material to resist the transfer of heat is amazing. I could continue holding one side of this section of the silica material, even if the other side was glowing red hot. But it is very fragile stuff. Watch how it crumbles under the influence of just my fingers. Quite apart from not bonding, it comes away very easily. Hardly surprising that some have doubted whether it's strong enough to